In this video, we're gonna turn this Harbor Freight shop press into a metal bending monster. All right, well, I guess I need to get started with getting the press together. All right, now for the good part. This is the weld it yourself version of Swag Off-Road's 20-ton heavy-duty finger brake kit. This kit is made specifically to fit right in with the Harbor Freight 20-ton press that we just got. First impressions is everything in this kit is super heavy-duty. The guide rods, the base plate channel is 3/8 of an inch thick, which is super nice. And the fingers themselves, when you put them all together, you have a 19-inch wide bending surface, and there's 5 of them. So you have a 9-inch wide one, a 4-inch, a 3-inch, a 2-inch, and a 1-inch. Step 1 is to weld these solid guide tubes into the base channel. So we have to make sure we get them nice and clean, especially since we're TIG welding, but I would anyway, regardless, even if you're MIG welding. Get all the surface rust, the mill scale off the top of the metal. I made sure not to take out too much material because these actually press down in here before you weld up the bung. And throughout this whole thing, like everything I weld, I'm wiping the entire thing off with acetone. I'm not gonna show it always, but here's me getting the initial wipe because this is just all raw steel, so it's still pretty dirty at this stage. While we're putting in the bungs, there's optional clamp ears that have to be welded onto the side. So again, just gonna clean off the mill scale and get them tacked on too. There's this little weird thing sticking off from the inside, probably from the plasma cutter and the cut path it took. So I'm just gonna file that by hand so I can get the ear to fit in there real nice. It's gonna be easier to put the ears on first because everything can be clamped tightly, and then to put the guide tubes in, or the rod for the guide tube, we have to put that in the press we just got. The directions say to push the tube into the hole, press it in or beat it in with a hammer about half the thickness of the metal. That way you can have plenty of weld on the backside and still be able to grind it down. So I just stacked a couple washers. That way I can shove it down in there with the press and not have to worry about going too far. All right, before we go any further, I want to talk about this video's sponsor, which is Everlast, and more specifically, the 255 EXT. The 255 EXT is a digital inverter-based machine that has plenty of power and features at a budget-friendly price. It has pulse on both AC and DC, waveform control, and 120 volt and 240 volt operation. There's a ton of settings that you can play with, so when you find one that you're comfortable with, you might want to use the unit's built-in memory right here, and you can save up to 9, I believe, different memory functions. And I have a cooler hooked up to mine, but that's something that you can purchase later and add on if you're not ready to purchase it all at one time. So if you are interested in an Everlast welder, make sure to check the link out in the description below and you can find out more information there. If you're ready to purchase, make sure you use promo code Voss at checkout and you'll get a free Nova foot pedal and torch upgrade kit. You just put that code in the checkout comments and they will hook you up. Thanks again to Everlast for sponsoring this video. So before we can weld up the little rosette here where we left that gap, we gotta make sure these are square. Obviously this way, we can take a full-size square and just place it in here. See, it needs to move a little bit. and keep adjusting it. But this way, it doesn't fit in there really. So what I'm gonna do is I took one of the fingers, this is actually one of the fingers that comes with the kit, and since this edge is machined, we can stick it down in here and see which way it needs to go. Okay, according to the instructions, we have to weld these guide tubes on the end of this upper plate right here. This plate has this notch machined in it, and this is where the fingers actually set, just like this. And it says these tubes need to be lined up perfectly centered with the finger. So not center of this bar, they need to be centered with how these fingers are there. Once the finger's in there, when this is actually all put together, this other piece bolts to here and it sandwiches the fingers in there, and that's actually how they're held. So for the first time, I'm gonna get to use my new fixture table from Strong Hand Tools. I already have this clamped down. This is gonna be the back plate, and we're gonna clamp this against it as soon as I clean everything up. This is my first real project, getting to try out all my Strong Hand tools on the Pro Build table from Strong Hands. Super nice, keeping everything nice and square. These washers turned out pretty useful, finding them and using them in this project, because I just stacked up enough of them to get this tube right in the center of the finger, and then I could clamp it down and shove it against the bar and make sure everything's tight when we get it tacked and welded. This is the back side of that top weld, so I want to make sure I get all that scale cleaned off there so I can do a pass and it really looks real nice without any contamination on the back side. Since the bar is so thick, I kind of want to try my hand at a little bit of a weave weld to stack up that weld and get some beefiness to it. So I'm going to clean off the top of this and again have fresh material to weld over. The next thing the directions say to do is just check the clearance here with the bar that bolts on and make sure the weld's not holding it up. It says if it is and your weld's a little tall, you can just knock this corner off, but I think we're good. After that, we have to weld 2 studs into these little squares. And it has like this carriage bolt that has a square already, and I think you just pop them in like this and then weld it up on this side, because once we put the bottom die in here, you won't be able to get to these, so they need to be solid. Now, there's only 2 more pieces that we have to weld, and this next one is the biggest piece, and that is the bottom die that sits in the bottom base plate here. It says in the directions that if you're not making contact right here, you can actually shave down this point to drop it down in there, but mine looks pretty good, so I'm glad about that. I'm just gonna clean up the mill scale off both of these pieces where I'm actually gonna weld, and then I'm gonna clamp some dies into here and drop this down and use that to actually center this piece. The last thing was welding the retaining collar on the top of the press. This just holds the arbor from the main press and makes sure it doesn't slip off, keeps everything safe. I did get some pops in the metal, so I don't know what it was made out of. I did clean off the surface, so I'm not sure. It's just probably whatever that collar was machined out of. You want to make sure you keep the collar on the thicker part of the top plate, so that way you can still remove the thinner bar and change out your fingers. Otherwise, these bolts wouldn't even be doing anything and you would just be welding the top solid. I was curious with how tall the springs were, if this thing would actually completely close down, so I did my best scientific test and can confirm it will close all the way with these springs. This is that backstop, that's what we put those bungs in for before, and it's just, you know, lets you set a backstop so you can slide in and do repeatable parts. And there it is, Swag Off-Road's 20-ton heavy-duty finger brake press kit, the weld-it-yourself kit. What's cool about this is at the time of recording, this entire setup, brand new, is $600. From Harbor Freight and this from Swag, if you weld it yourself. So, I don't know, let's give it a shot here. I got a piece of 3/16 steel. We're just gonna see what the bends look like out of this thing. First shot. Now, I obviously overbent that a little bit, but you know, I just wanted to give her all she had on her first outing. But that's kind of the result. The reason you can overbend it is because the pitch on the top dies is actually greater than 90, which works nice because I could have stopped right at 90, but if I wanted that tight bend, I saw in the directions, it actually suggests stacking pieces of angle iron on here, smaller pieces of angle iron to tighten up that radius, which is nice. So you can just keep these dies in here and change your radius by changing the pieces of angle iron you stack in here. Thank you to Swag Off-Road for sending me out their finger brake kit. And also, thank you to Everlast for sponsoring this video and helping us weld this kit up. The 255 EXT performed beautifully like always. If you're interested in checking out Everlast, I'm gonna leave a link down below. You can check them out through there. Greatly appreciated it. Lets them know you found them here. And if you're new to my channel, I'm Justin Voss. I make welding and fabrication videos here on YouTube. So I really hope you stick around and subscribe. If you give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, I would greatly appreciate that. It helps the algorithm a ton, and I'll see you next time.